I was looking, Lesley, at how to introduce you today. And I remember I went to the District 23 conference introduction where you were introduced by Val Sara when you were introducing Mary Crooks. And you explained how you did nursing first, but found you were unsuited and went to occupational health and safety, and how you advocate from the workers to the shop floor, from the shop floor to the CEOs, and advocate now in Zonta. But what you weren't able to mention was what an absolute fantastic host you are and how much you like to have fun. Because I had the privilege of staying with Lesley when I went to South Australia to speak at their area workshops there. And you were just great. So I'll stop the share and let you tell your story, Lesley.
Thanks very much, Carol. So yes, as you mentioned, started life, finished my training and took a deep breath and thought, well, that was all very well, but I didn't think I was very suited to the detail focus that nursing requires. However, what I took away from it in the long term was we learnt to be good risk managers, and that was the foundation of some of the work I then took on as an occupational health nurse. Working in industry, I think the one I usually get asked a lot of questions around is the startup of the Adelaide Casino as an occupational health nurse. And Jane and I actually did that together, and we were part of the first team there. So it was a very different approach to occupational health nursing. And then into industry, I was more based into manufacturing after that. So what I did was I then thought, well, this is something I'm really interested in, and I actually did 2 years of occupational health nursing studies, and then did some HR studies, and then I followed up with a risk management course in Monash in Victoria. That took a bit of dedication on my part because I actually drove to Melbourne once a month for lectures on the Saturday, and drove home again on Sunday, and then did my assignments when I got home. So that was an 18-month course. So that kind of kept me busy for a while.
Lesley, just let people know where you actually live in relation to Melbourne.
Okay, I lived in Adelaide at that time. So I used to knock off work at Friday lunchtime and just get in the car and get going to Melbourne and get in about 9 o'clock at night. So yeah, so it was a bit of effort there, but it was well worth it. And I've still got people from those courses in my network, and we keep in contact. So I think that's one of the outcomes of adult learning that you take away with you. But yeah, so working across manufacturing, I worked in the finance sector, and then went on to a role with Sunrise, the rice food company, as a group safety manager and environment. It was the first time I picked up environment, and it was early days back then. The organisation and I think we're all learning at the same time. And certainly the community was learning as well. So it was a great opportunity to find ways that could help the organisation, but also help the environment, especially around the rice food company, where our research organisation, there was a huge farm where they tried crossbreeding, etc., and growing different types of rice to reduce the amount of water that was used. And they were highly successful in that, and also in some instances reducing the time that the grain had to grow in. So it was a very innovative time, if you like, and it was very exciting being involved there, not just in Australia, but in the US and Thailand and Vietnam and Jordan. So I got to travel a fair bit. And it's not as glamorous as people think, just as some of us will know. So that role then led me to being General Manager of Occupational Health and Safety with elders. I'm trying to think, sort of making sure I keep a little bit of a timeline here. So I covered that for about 12, 18 months. And unfortunately, at the time, Elders was not doing too well financially. And so they retrenched the whole corporate office. I was probably more fortunate. They actually transferred me to Melbourne. and I spent another year working with the automotive side of their business, again in not only Australia but Thailand and the US. And I always talk about the challenging role in trying to get the workers that were embedded in the Tesla factory, because that we built the seats for the Tesla factory, and getting them to understand that white walls was not a very safe thing for forklift drivers because there was no depth perception. So they couldn't work out why their forklift operators were hitting walls all the time. So yes, so lots of little different things there that that you see in different behaviours with different people, different cultures, and learning to work with them and making sure that we could get the same outcomes internationally for the organisation. And that was where I learnt, I guess, on those last two roles, was establishing a system of work or system for occupational health and safety and environment that was the same the whole of the organisation. What didn't matter what country you were in, what location, that was the standard that we implemented. So people didn't have to work with lots of documentation. We just had the one process, and it worked very well. So once that they sold off the automotive division, I then took up a 6-month contract with Sydney Harbour City Ferries, and the kids still call them, they're all my ferries, by the way. They're Lesley's ferries or Nana's ferries. So, and that was a lovely gig. I really enjoyed it, but I turned down the offer to continue the employment with them. I decided I really did not enjoy the Sydney lifestyle, and I certainly couldn't replicate the lifestyle I had in Melbourne or Adelaide, not only financially, but just getting around. It was really difficult in that sense, although their public transport's fantastic. That bit I enjoyed. I then came back to Adelaide. I took up a contract then with Department of Health and Human Services in Victoria as a chief OHS officer. And I could never work out why I was called the chief. I kept thinking I should have a hat to go with the role, but they wouldn't give me one. But it was just a public service term. And so once that contract was finishing, I took up a national role with Adelaide Brighton Cement, which owns a lot of companies around Australia. With many of them, they don't change the name of. So like in WA, you've got Coburn Cement, they own that. And then in Northern Territory, Queensland, and also New South Wales and Victoria, there's a whole range of different organisations. That only lasted 12 months. I had strong differences of opinion with the Executive General Manager, and we decided to call it quits. So I then moved into semi-retirement and volunteering. So I still do a bit of work. I work with Compass facilities management at Roxby Downs or Olympic Dam, and sometimes over in the Pilbara. And I also work with the Australian Industry Group, doing training and audits for them. So just some background stuff in between everything else. Yeah. So I just get to work when I want to work, not when somebody says I should. So yeah, I hope that sort of gives you a bit of a cover of my background experience, managing teams, working with people, advocating. Occupational health and safety sadly always needs a fair bit of advocating to get things done well and to the benefit of all players in the organisation. So that's probably the best way to put it.
So how do you find it reconciles on your climate journey? Because I mean, you've mentioned a few names here. We've got cement, 8% of the world's emissions are from cement. You look at Roxby Downs, isn't that uranium?
Yeah, no, it's uranium, gold, nickel, copper. Yeah, okay. They cover quite a lot of the metals. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do I reconcile it? Yeah, it's for me, working with the facilities management was still again more about it was like working in a holiday resort because you've got all these cabins. Yeah. You've got people moving in and out on a weekly basis. You've got your housekeeping, your groundskeeping, and your maintenance. probably enjoyed working with the maintenance guys the best, in that sense that they're a little bit more down to earth than some of the other areas. But with working with Adelaide Brighton, covering the environment was really very much about driving down the emissions and making sure that the level of pollution, not only meeting the EPA requirements, but we worked a lot with the community that lived around the operations side of things were never happy. And I don't mean that in a nasty way. I guess in some ways they brought cheap housing because it was close to a cement factory, but then they didn't want the offside of that being the cement dust floating around in the community. And it did. There's no getting away from that. But it was also finding ways to reduce that. And we were using construction waste and in burning in the kilns instead of trying to burn coal or gas or whatever. So again, we were looking at ways to take product that was a waste and would have been put back into the ground or, you know, used in or left laying around, and making sure that we could actually burn it off in a way that didn't actually pollute the community. So there was a lot of work being done there, and I know a lot of that's continued and making a difference. Yeah.
Does anyone have any other questions that they would like to ask Lesley? Just looking at the hands, go through a couple of pages. No. Okay. Do you find that with your advocacy work that you did through your work, do you find that that's been an absolute benefit for you with Zonta? Do you find that your work life and your home life, how do they go together?
Yeah, so what it does is I guess when you're advocating in the workplace, your network and the people you need to talk to are nailed down in the job. So you're not chasing them all over the countryside, if you like. You can either stroll into an office or pick up the phone and go, hey guys, you know, we need to do something about this, or there's another meeting. You know, there's always meetings in business where you get to expand or influence. So in that sense, it was a lot easier, if you like, or more convenient. Whereas when you're advocating like this, it's because I'd spent so much more time in Melbourne and in the Riverina, my network is in those states. So I've had to actually really think and learn, how am I going to network here politically, and not just in South Australia, but as the District Advocacy Chair, networking again with the likes of like Amanda Rishworth, and before that it was Anne Rushton. So getting in front of those people and having the conversations, making sure I'm well read. At the moment, I've just finished a book called Invisible Women, and it's an absolute eye-opener around gender inequality. It scares the hell out of me because I mean, you know, it's there, but I don't think we understand the depth of it. And the book really is just the surface of it, even though it's very well researched. At the moment, I'm working my way through the new national plan against violence that's just been released and being promoted by the government, the federal government. It's 144 pages. I'm skipping some, I'll tell you that now, but I'm hoping to get to the crux of it shortly, and that we can actually then look at how I can tie this with the gender equality that we're looking at with climate action and Zonta's principles, and what can we pick from it to drive with our next layer of advocacy as a district. And I'm also setting up meetings with the other 2 districts in Australia, their advocacy chairs, and following up with them and seeing if we can get a more national approach as Zonta. Again, that's my organisational approach, is you take the lead players and try and influence and then get an agreement around what we're actually going to focus on. And then each district will drive that through our own advocacy chairs in the areas. So that's the principle, if you like, Carol, and that's a reapplying of what I learned in the workplace and applying it in Zonta.
Question from Sue. Mute, Sue.
Unmute. Lesley, from your experience of working with these big companies like concrete companies and Roxby Downs and that, Do you think they've now got to the point where they're saying, well, we seriously have to look at our emissions, we seriously have to look at the way we do things, that there's no trying to fudge figures now or anything like that, trying to take shortcuts? You know, we have to change our way of business, and we accept that now, we see the benefits of it.
Thanks, Suzanne. It's a bit of a double-edged question or answer, if you like. And my first thought was, well, it really depends who's sitting in the chair of the CEO or general manager. If you look at like Compass with the facilities management, they were already doing things and I guess trying to work with BHP, because BHP owns the site, but they are getting in things that will recycle food waste, because there is an awful lot of food waste coming off the kitchens, because they're feeding on average around 2,000 to 3,000 people every week, 3 times a day. So you can imagine there's quite a bit of waste coming off that. So they're actually looking at recycling of that. So yes, they are looking at opportunities. I think the thing that most organisations have finally worked out, which was the brief that we were, or the drum we were banging at Sunrise, is it's usually a positive impact to an organisation financially if they actually do participate in environmentally conscious actions to reduce their impact on the environment. And that's, you know, I remember trying to talk the engineer into putting up a cost activity, if you like, around putting on solar panels on all the paddy sheds, because I was really excited about solar panels at the time. And I thought there was a great opportunity, because as the paddy sheds did not actually use that much electricity to run, and it would have been a way to breach it. But he was going, no, it won't work. But what it did do was start to shift his thinking. So I mightn't have won you know, that minor skirmish, but the battle went on into, well, let's look at other ways. How do we monitor our electricity or our energy use? And then they broke that down and started to look at, well, what's happening in the manufacturing of the rice and rice cakes, etc. And what they found was that they were using all these compressors, using up energy and waste, and they all leaked. So they actually shut down that system and put in a whole different system and reduced their energy waste. So that's, you know, it's a small win, if you like, at the time, but it's getting that change and shift in thinking. Are they all getting there, Suzanne? Look, I think only as much as the rest of the community is, and every organisation, and this is my saying, is a microcosm representative of our communities as a whole. So you've got the good, bad and the ugly. Doesn't matter which way you go. And it really depends on the person at the top.
Well, thank you so much for that, Lesley. That's been quite enlightening to see what's been going on in your life, and thank you for contributing and sharing your story today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Carol.